Peace and blessings. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Dr. Bobby Price, and today we're going to have an interesting conversation about the carnivore diet. All right, now before we get started, because I know people like to go to war over their diet, okay? If you want to start a conversation or start an argument with somebody, start talking about what you eat versus what they eat. It's an instant argument. But here's what I want to say to all my people out there who either subscribe to the carnivore diet or something similar. This is what I want to say to you. Ultimately, we want the same thing. I want to be healthy. I want you to be healthy. Okay? The reason why this discussion is important is because a lot of the information that people are sharing about this diet is all about the short-term benefits. Nobody is talking about the long-term effects of the diet. So today I'm gonna talk about some of my concerns about the carnivore diet. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that I may have some biases considering I don't eat animal products, okay? But even with those biases, what I'll tell you is that I want for you what you want for you. I want you to be healthy, all right? I'm not one of those people who are judgmental to people. You can even ask my family. I have been completely plant-based for almost 14 years, okay? My family has watched from the beginning to now. Okay, and I'll tell you, I did not grow up plant-based at all. I grew up eating everything everybody else eats, and probably worse. And that's why I don't have any judgment about this, okay? This is why I can go around my family, and they can eat what they eat, I can eat what I eat, and I don't have to make them feel horrible, all right? They still try to make me feel horrible, even almost 40 years later. But so be it. I just learned to not be judgmental because at one point in my life, that's how I ate. And so what I will do is people want to be educated, I'll educate them, okay? Now, with that being said, just another emphasis. I don't want to fight with nobody out there. I want to fight with the FDA approving drugs that get black box warnings for cancer. I want to fight with the pharmaceutical industry that is creating injections that are affecting people for multiple generations to come. That's who, if I wanted to fight, that's who I would fight, not you. All right. So with that being said, we're going to jump right into it. Again, these are my 10 concerns about the carnivore diet. And I think you're going to be a little bit surprised, okay? Especially by number one, because most people think I'm going to go all the way left and, talk about the animals and how this is hurtful for the animals. I'm going to leave that out of this conversation. All right. But I think you're going to be surprised by number one. But before we get into it, let's address the fact that what is the carnivore diet? The carnivore diet is a diet where you're eating meat, poultry, eggs, some dairy, and then I do believe seafood and fish. Okay. So essentially all animal products. No vegetables, no fruits, no nuts, no seeds, none of that. All right. So let's first establish that. All right, so that's what the carnivore diet is. All right. Now, it's been made popular in the last 5 years, and I'm going to talk about one of the leaders in the industry or in that movement of the carnivore diet who is no longer on the carnivore diet. I think that's really important. I'm going to explain what he said in an interview, which you can go look up why he's not on the carnivore diet. So we'll get into that as well, too. And then at the end, I'll sort of give you my synopsis of everything. All right. And I think that's fair. All right. So number one, the number one thing I want to start with is that, interestingly enough, what most people don't understand is that Whenever you do an elimination diet, and that's exactly what a carnivore diet is, you eliminate a ton of other foods, okay? And typically it's eliminating macros. In this case, you eliminated everything with the exception of animal-based products, okay? Let me tell you something about that. Two things. One, when you do an elimination diet, typically, it doesn't matter what the elimination diet is, you tend to lose weight and feel better, all right? All right, that's most elimination diets. When you eliminate some primary macros away from your usual eating, you tend to lose weight and feel better, all right? But let me tell you why. That's because in most cases, when you do this, most people, when they go on an elimination diet, they're removing ultra processed foods, all right? If you remove ultra processed foods from your diet alone, don't change anything else, that's gonna greatly impact your overall health just by eliminating ultra processed foods. All right. The standard American diet is 69% processed food. So if 70% of what you're eating today is essentially synthetic trash, uh, that's the best way to put it. Something that's in a box, bag, can, or jar that's loaded with dyes, thickening agents, preservatives, et cetera. Things that preserve the food to make it last longer on the shelf, but don't preserve you when you consume it. If you're eating ultra processed foods and you remove that, you're going to lose weight and feel healthier because that primarily is what people are eating, 70%. Okay, I think that's hugely important. All right. Also, if you eliminate gluten, okay, if you get rid of breads and pastas, you're going to feel better. Because most people, even though they may not have an allergy to gluten, they're either sensitive to gluten or they're intolerant to gluten and they don't know it. So they're having gut issues. So two things, you eliminated ultra processed foods, which is 70% of the diet. And then a lot of that ultra processed food is also breads and pastas and cookie cakes and pies. All right. And then if you eliminate sugar, which the average American consumes 152 pounds of sugar every year, if you do that for 30 days, that alone, you're just going to lose weight and feel better. Okay, so I think that's really important because a lot of times people are attributing the benefits of a certain diet. Doesn't matter if it was Atkins diet, because Atkins told us to get rid of, gluten essentially, all the carbs. Okay, which I agree with. Okay, so when carnivores or paleo people say this or keto people say we need to get rid of all of these unhealthy carbs, I agree 100%. Okay, but it's just really important to understand sometimes people are attributing the benefit to the diet instead of what you eliminated, which was causing the issues in the first place, the weight gain, the feeling unhealthy, the brain fog, the list goes on and on and on, okay? The issue, in my opinion, or my concern with the carnivore diet is that you're eating a diet that is primarily meat-based, animal-based, okay? So let's say that, for all intents and purposes, you're eating an animal's diet, like that's carnivore, okay? But your digestive system isn't built for that, okay? Your physiological system isn't built for that. Your requirements aren't built for that, okay? It's just really important. We never consider these things. We never sit down and say, and this is what has me upset with science, not necessarily people, is that sit down and have an honest conversation and look at our digestive system, look at our immune system, look at our nervous system, look at all the systems in our bodies and say, what does all of these systems specifically need and what group of foods will provide this? I think that's the most important thing. And the unfortunate thing is when you're only eating animal products, you're not able to get things in your diet that only come from plants. That over the course of thousands, if not millions of years, our bodies have been eating and using and actually now has become a requirement to sustain life. Really, really important. All right, so that's number one. Number two, meat is really, in most cases, in many cases, I won't say all cases, but meat is a secondary form of nutrition. I'm going to give you some examples. All right, some examples that you're more familiar with. Number one, when you need omega-3s, what does your doctor tell you to take? They tell you to take fish oil, okay? The truth is, the omega-3s that are in fish don't come from the fish. They come from algae, which is a plant. Okay, so you eating the meat is a secondary form of the nutrition. You're the third person in the ring. Or you're the third sort of consumption of that. Whereas you could just get it directly from the algae, but also purslane is loaded with omega-3s as well too. Do we need omega-3s? Absolutely. Are most people in the world deficient in omega-3s? Yes. But again, it's really important for people. A lot of times people are touting you have to eat meat because of you have to get this vital nutrients, omega-3s in this case, when the actual omega-3s actually comes from a plant. Another example, vitamin B12. So for people who are vegan, and I don't necessarily label myself as vegan, I label myself as whole food, plant-based, even though I have vegan morals, I guess. But I just don't use the title because I'm gonna tell you why I don't use the title, because most people who are vegan still eat Doritos and Oreos and a whole bunch of food that isn't plants, but it's not meat. And in my opinion, that's why there are vegans who are very unhealthy, who don't lose weight and who don't feel better when they go vegan. Is because you're eating a whole bunch of vegan junk food. You're not actually eating plants, okay? But another example of this meat being a secondary form of nutrition, a lot of times people will say, okay, the issue with vegans is that they're going to be vitamin B12 deficient. Well, vitamin B12 doesn't come from meat. It actually comes from a bacteria. And that bacteria is often found in the soil. All right, so again, it's just really important. A lot of the things that we're being taught and is being spouted is saying that you have to have this because you got to get this, but you can get that from the primary source, which in many cases is either soil or a plant, okay? I think that's really, really important, all right? And the reason why I say that is because when you consume meat, you have to cook it. And when you cook it, in most cases, what people don't understand, you create what are called heterocyclic amines and all these other things that I'll talk about later that are unfortunate consequences of eating meat, and you get these versus eating the original source or something. So I think that's really important. Number three, a big concern for me is that, again, I just don't like the fact that you got doctors and nutritionists and influencers who are arguing, use this diet, use this diet. You got people who are vegan who are saying, I'm not vegan no more and it almost killed me. Again, I don't subscribe to that label. But for me, I think it's really, really important for people to understand is that this blame game is not going to help us. Okay. And in most cases, I've heard like people who were on the plant-based side say, hey, I stopped being vegan because the food almost killed me. These plants have these things in them, and these things are dangerous to humans. Okay. But my only issue with that is this. When you go through this list of don't eat this food because it has oxalates in it, don't eat these foods because they have ligands in it, don't eat this food because it's this and that and that, don't eat these plants, you're blaming foods that people don't eat. People don't eat plants. That's the truth. I mean, most vegans don't eat plants. Most of what they're eating is out of a box, bag, can, jar, is junk food. All right. So if most vegans aren't eating actual plants, unfortunately, then you know people who aren't vegan, who are eating just a regular standard American diet, they're not eating plants either. As a matter of fact, it's less than 5%. As I told you before, 70% of what they're eating is actually ultra processed food. Okay, a very small percentage is veggies, and guess what? That small percentage, let's just say it's 5%. 50% of the 5% is some form of a white potato, and in most cases, a genetically modified potato. And that could be mashed potatoes or French fries. So half of the veggies that people are eating is some form of a GMO white potato. Okay, so you can't blame the unhealthiness of the American population or Western populations on plants because people just don't eat them. People don't eat healthy. People eat, generally speaking, out of drive-through windows and off of the shelf, okay, in box, bag, cans, and jars. So I think that's really important because sometimes people make the argument for a certain kind of diet by actually criticizing and demonizing plants, and people are just not eating them. And I think that's really important. Number 4, and I think this one is probably the most important of them all, okay? But before I go to that, let me say this. Are there plants that you shouldn't eat? Absolutely. Okay, plants are beings just like us. Some plants have defensive mechanisms that unfortunately make it uncomfortable for us to eat them. There are plants that are actually poisonous. So yes, there are plants that we should not be eating. I agree with that. But the point I'm trying to make is, generally speaking, people don't eat plants, okay? And when they do, it's some form of white potato or it's overcooked, all right? Number 4, and this is probably the most important. One of the leaders of the carnivore movement, Dr. Paul Saladino, he wrote a book, I think in like 2019, about the carnivore diet and its benefits, okay? And he went on a crusade speaking on behalf of the carnivore diet, leading the movement. Most people who have been on the carnivore diet are familiar with who Paul Saladino, Dr. Paul Saladino is. However, in a recent interview, I do believe this year in 2025, or at the end of 2024, he's in the interview explaining why he had to stop the carnivore diet. He was on the diet for 1.5 to 2 years. And again, in the beginning, he had huge benefits, as I mentioned in number 1. And most people will because they stop eating the trash. As soon as you stop eating the trash, you're going to get better. And so, in my opinion, this is what he's explaining in his book in 2019 as related to the carnivore diet. However, 1.5 years later, 2 years later, in an interview, he's explaining all of the negative side effects that he experienced as a result of the carnivore diet. Not somebody who was vegan and who was just saying, hey, this is horrible, or plant-based. This is one of the leaders of the movement. He said he experienced horrible muscle cramps, heart palpitations, sleep disturbances that kept him up at night, lowered his testosterone, which is crazy because most people are under the impression if you don't eat meat that you're weak. But eating just animal products actually lowered his testosterone and negatively impacted his sex hormone binding globulin as well too. On top of the diarrhea that happens when you consume a carnivore diet over time. You have to remember, and I'm going to talk about this in the next one, to form a bowel movement, you must have fiber and hydration. And meat and animal products have neither. They do not have hydration. They do not have fiber. That is what forms a bowel movement, okay? And so now he's added back some plants, some fruits, some honey, some coconut. He's adding back the plants. And in my opinion, and again, this is just my opinion, I think over time, you're going to see even more added back. And I think that's really important because, again, most people are looking at the short-term benefits, not thinking about what happens when you consume a diet that is not made for our biology, okay? Long-term, okay? Even look at another example is Dr. Drew. I think he was on the show, The Biggest Losers. Started the carnivore diet, was a big advocate for it, quit as well. I saw this documentary on Netflix, The Liver King. Look at what happened there. Everybody thought he was big and ripped because he was on this carnivore diet. Come to find out, he was using steroids. Okay, so again, it's just really important to sort of look at the truth behind this. I think that's really important. And again, these aren't shots being fired at the whole carnivore movement, because diets are fads. They come and they go. Okay, we just have to look at this from a very objective standpoint. All right, number 5, the carnivore diet is completely lacking in fiber. And what I hear from a lot of the, proponents and, people who are pushing the carnivore diet, including some physicians, is that now they're saying, well, you don't even need fiber, when for the last 100 years, all of the studies around the world have said consistently to have a healthy diet, the more fiber you have in it, the more healthier you will be, the better your teeth will be, the better your overall health will be, your immune system, all of these things. Every study points to that, every reputable study. Every study that was done properly says that you need fiber in your diet. And you have people who are quoting things that are not studies that are saying fiber is actually bad for you. So going against thousands of studies, okay? And what they don't understand is what I mentioned before. To form a bowel movement, but you have to have bowel movements to eliminate, okay? But more importantly, fiber feeds the good bacteria in your gut, which is where 80% of your immune system is made, okay? All right, and one of the things you have to have if you want to survive is you have to have a strong immune system if you want good heart health, but most importantly, you have to have a strong immune system if you're gonna fight off viruses, bacterial infection, and most importantly, cancer, okay? 80% of our immune system made by our good bacteria in our gut. And guess what that good bacteria consumes? It eats fiber, prebiotics, fiber. And when it doesn't get it, that good bacteria dies, okay? Along with your immune system. So hugely important. And that bacteria is also sweeping out and cleaning the gut as well too. It improves digestion. All right, it decreases the risk for colorectal cancer the more fiber that you eat. Okay, so it's just really important to understand. That's another one of my biggest concerns about the carnivore diet, because animal products contain zero fiber, no fiber at all. All right. Number 6, kidney function. Because the more meat you eat, it increases what is called GFR, which is your glomerular filtration rate. That's the rate at which your kidneys filter waste out of your body. I'm going to repeat that again. That's the rate at which your kidneys filter waste like ammonia out of your body, okay? Like uric acid out of your body, okay? And we know that whenever anybody has any sort of kidney issues, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, we restrict their protein when they come into the hospital. That's the first thing we do. Dietarily, we restrict their protein. All right? So we know that an all-meat diet is going to increase your GFR, okay? Which is going to put a lot of workload on your kidneys. This is going to lead to hypertension. This is going to lead to hypofiltration, which means that it's not going to be cleansing your blood the way it needs to cleanse your blood. This is going to lead to proteinuria, which means you're going to have protein in the urine as well too. And it also leads to kidney stones as well, and gout. All right. Again, when somebody gets gout, we tell them to stop eating certain meats. We remove a lot of meat from their diet, because guess what? Meats have purines in them. Purines are actually going to affect the kidneys at some point. All right? That's what actually causes the pain and gout. All right? Especially from red meat. All right? So that's really important. Number 7, you have to be cautious of this whole movement of healthy meat. And the reason why I say that is because, one, a lot of people will say, just make sure you get it pasture raised. A lot of people don't know what that means. I have a farm, and my farm is all plants, but I live in an area where there's other farms and it's livestock. And I'll tell you this, when something is considered pasteurized, it does not mean that that animal grew up on a pasture and was out there eating grass. Okay, I'll give you an example with chickens. For chickens to be considered pasture raised, they are literally in that same livestock house, thousands upon thousands of chickens stepping over each other, getting so big because they're full of hormones and antibiotics and they can't walk, okay? They can be stacked on top of each other, but if you create a little opening where these chickens can, if they do, go outside only to come back in, okay? They may go outside into an area where there's no grass, okay, and then come back in. But if they do that, okay, why they would do that, I don't know, because if you're a chicken and you've never seen outside, you don't even know there's a reason to go outside. But that's all it requires for it to be pasture raised, okay? Same thing with cows. A cow may grow up completely in a stall, being fed soy and all kind of other horrible things, full of antibiotics, full of hormones, RBH, all right? Spend 90% of its lifetime in that environment, and then all of a sudden it's transported to a slaughterhouse where it's outside maybe for a couple of days and then it's slaughtered, and that's pasture raised. So the industry is just phony in and of itself, in addition to all of the hormones, the antibiotics. But most importantly, this, and I find this to be the most important thing, is that most meat, in my opinion, today is lab grown. All right, we thought that the vegan movement with the Impossible and Beyond Meat was the only fake meat. Nope. Just do a quick research for yourself on the internet. Lab meat being approved by the FDA. Okay, lab meat has, if lab meat has already been approved by the FDA, in my opinion, most people who have been eating meat have probably been eating lab-grown meat for the last 5 to 10 years, and you didn't know it. Okay, so I just think that's really, really important as well too. These are factors that people aren't really looking into. And then people don't think about the long-term effects. What happens when your insulin is actually low for an extended period of time? All right, people are always wanting to lower their insulin for the fact that insulin is actually a fat storage hormone and actually is taking glucose into the cell, and they want to keep that low, which is good. But when your insulin levels are drop bottom because you're only eating animal products and you never actually create any insulin or put any glucose in your body, and our primary way of creating energy is through the glucose metabolism system, then there are side effects to that. And a lot of people experience those side effects, in my opinion, like Dr. Paul Saladino. Electrolyte imbalances, because you're not getting those minerals and vitamins and things of that nature that you need that only come from plants. ApoB is greatly increased, which is a protein on LDL, which is also a marker of cardiovascular disease that increases. Diarrhea, you're going to have deficiencies in vitamin C, no vitamin C in meat. We also see what happens when people don't consume vitamin C for an extended period of time. They get scurvy, okay? Like the people who were traveling by way of the ocean, they all got scurvy because they didn't have citrus fruits or ate things that had vitamin C in them, okay? And then a buildup of ammonia as well too when you're consuming that amount of protein, which is really, really important, all right? Number 9, And I'm just mentioning this in passing, no science behind it, but I just think it's a common sense thing. You've never heard throughout history somebody say, eat meat to heal this, okay? But you've heard thousands of eat this plant or this herb to heal this, okay? There are medicinal things in herbs and plants. So the idea of just cutting off something that is healing and historically has been proven to be healing, and then even today, up until the early 2000s, probably 50% of pharmaceuticals produced or created were based on a plant-based derivative of something that heals something, a plant that heals something. All right, so no cures in meat. Even though, again, like, you may feel better, you may lose weight, you may feel stronger when you initially do a carnivore diet, but again, that's because you eliminated the processed foods and all of the other things that you shouldn't have been eating in the first place. And then finally, number 10, far more deficiencies with meat than there is with eating just plants, okay? It's always highlighted that people who eat plant-based commonly have deficiencies of vitamin B12 or deficiencies in iron. And as I mentioned before earlier, vitamin B12 actually comes from a bacteria, okay? You can get it from water lentils. I just think most nutritionists and most doctors don't know where you can actually increase vitamin B12 in plant-based foods, so they say that there's none in it, okay? But being a plant-based nutrition, I just understand what to eat. The other thing is, in most cases, when you have a vitamin B12 deficiency, there are people who have not consumed vitamin B12 in 10 years and they still don't get a deficiency. Most people get a deficiency because they have low stomach acid. All right, when you consume vitamin B12 in a food, you have to have enough stomach acid for it to cleave off a R protein so that that vitamin B12 can be released so you can absorb it. Most people have very low stomach acid because of the horrible diet that they eat. Okay, so it's not always, the fact that they're eating plants only and not eating meat that they have a vitamin B12 deficiency. And I know that to be true because I've filled hundreds of thousands of prescriptions. And what I could tell you is that every time I saw a prescription for vitamin B12 injection or whatever it may be, most of those people were not plant-based. Okay, so it's not just something specific to people who are plant-based. Okay, same thing with iron. There's two different types of iron. There's heme iron, and then there's non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is often associated with plants, and heme iron is associated with meat, okay? And it is true that heme iron is far more absorbed than non-heme iron found in plants. But also what they don't tell you is all of the negative side effects of heme iron versus non-heme iron, okay? So you could be eating all the meat you want in the world, but if you're getting a lot of heme iron, look up the side effects of non-heme iron. Digestive issues, inflammation, the list goes on and on and on, okay? So it's also really important to break down a lot of the myths that people are describing. In most cases, when I see people have an iron deficiency, it's because they have a parasite. And most people, if take these two fingers, put it here on your wrist, or take the right two and put it right here. And if you feel a pulse, you probably got a parasite. Most people have parasite. And if you look it up, what parasites love to consume, iron is one of them. So if you're consuming the right foods and you're on an iron supplement and you still have iron deficiency, it's simply because the parasite is consuming it. So you have to address that by actually getting rid of the parasite. I have a whole entire video on that, so just check out my video on parasite and then you'll see that. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, I don't want to fight with anybody out there. I'm sharing my concerns on the diet. I think even if you're on the diet, you should take these concerns seriously, look them up for yourself, make a decision for yourself. As I mentioned before, I've been plant-based for almost 14 years. I eat in diversity. I eat a diversity of plants And most people don't eat a diversity of plants. As a matter of fact, most people don't eat plants. And when they eat them, they overcook them. All right. So I think I do a better job, and I'll say I do a better job because I'm far more knowledgeable. But if you eat a diversity of plants, it's very difficult to have deficiencies. Okay. That's really important. But no matter what your diet is, your diet should boost your immunity because that's one of the primary things that's going to prevent disease. Your diet should be natural, so it should not be ultra processed foods or anything that is loaded with food chemicals. Your diet should hydrate you. We are 80% water. So if you're eating food that doesn't contain water, which animal products do not contain any amount of water, then you're going to struggle because our bodies are made up of 80% water. You also should be eating a diet that is preventative. It prevents disease as well too. It should be full of antioxidants, flavonoids, polyphenols, etc. Things that prevent disease in your body as well too. And a diet with foods that are loaded, like super loaded with nutrients and that are nutrient dense. I think that's the most important approach to a diet. All right, no matter what label you put on it, that is the diet, not a limit. That is the nutrition plan that is designed for our bodies. And any type of elimination diet where you eliminate something for a short period of time, you're going to experience short period results. But to have long-term results, you got to do things that actually give long-term benefits. So, yeah, that's just my thoughts. So hit the subscribe button, or maybe you hit the unsubscribe button. Share this with people. I think it's important for people to get a wider sort of view of things. Again, no matter what diet you choose, I'm not an evangelist. I'm not here to tell people what diet to choose for themselves. I'm here to share information with people. So until the next time, peace and blessings and Godspeed. Take care.